Hello, and welcome to Property Matters, a weekly discussion show around all matters property. And joining me, as always, our resident property expert, Joe Joshi, who is the Managing Director of Fairview International and Town and Country Property Auctions London. And our special guest this week, we welcome Nadeem Akhtar, who is a solicitor and Managing Partner of Blackstone Legal, based in High Wycombe. Gentlemen, good morning, welcome.
Good morning, Paul.
Good morning.
Good morning on this very special day of Remembrance Sunday. And obviously, our thoughts and prayers are with all the people that have lost their lives during those times, for all the people that exist today. I know there's a silence held at 11 o'clock, and of course we will adhere to that just as we part from the program at that time. But it's a very poignant time today, considering where we've been with the pandemic and the loss of lives that happened in what I think is a bit of a silent war this year in 2020. But our heart and prayers are with those families that have lost loved ones.
Indeed. We're here for the next 40 minutes talking around property matters, and we are live, as we say, and therefore anybody who has any questions for either of our experts here today, we'd love to see you put the questions in the comments below the video, and they will, as if by magic, come up on the screen here in front of us, and we'll be able to answer your questions, and delighted to receive them. So, as always, we start off with what's been happening in the news in terms of property. And Robert Jenrick, the housing minister, gentlemen, come out this week and said that the housing industry or the property industry is open for business. You can show potential buyers around properties, agents can show people around, builders and tradespeople can go into houses and work, obviously, whilst observing social distancing rules, which is good news. But in Wales, of course, they can't. And I thought I'd just start, Nadeem, if I may, by going to you and saying, how has the pandemic been affecting how you conduct business in terms of conveyancing?
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for the invite, Paul. I think in the early days, in the initial lockdown period, the first few months was very difficult. It was hard to get any work done because obviously people were in lockdown. Everything had to be remotely, and we all had to be set up remotely to work from home. But over time, slowly, and with various incentives from the government in respect of stamp duty, the market has picked up quite considerably.
And what are the specific challenges that you're facing with social distancing and obviously people, particularly in councils, not working from offices and so on? So has that inevitably led to delays?
Yes, obviously part of the property process is we have to get searches done with the local authority, drainage, environmental. Environmental is not too bad, but the drainage and the local authority especially, there's such a backlog and time lag because of shortage of staff at the council that is delaying the whole process.
Indeed. Joe, thoughts on how property is progressing or not, as the case may be at the moment?
Paul, the property market, in spite of the current pandemic, has been doing quite well. Of course, the stamp duty holiday has generated a lot of interest, and the main thing is that I think time. People have time now actually to stop and think about what they want to do. And as I've said on a number of occasions, the situation that has happened in 2020 has given people time to think about, the whole structure of their life and whether they want to be in the big city and go out and move into the country and be able to work from home. All of these have been driving factors, topped up with the fact that there is a stamp duty holiday and the opportunities there. I think one of the only things that, which I would obviously, I'm sure Nadeem will cover, a lot of the legal professions are actually now almost snowed under with that, and there is the danger that has been constantly said that some people may not meet their timescale, and I'm sure is one of the things that we can cover with Nadeem today as to how people can prepare themselves and and what they need to be able to do in order to help themselves, to make sure that their legal guidance is also able to help them and move them. So it's a case of doing things rather than thinking about doing things. And I think that my view is, and from my part as an agent and as an auctioneer, is normally that people delay themselves in doing or actioning things that they should have done, and that then prolongs the issues further down. It's a case of, I thought that's what was happening, and when actually I thought means it wasn't happening because you actually never got around to doing it. So I always like to encourage people that follow the guidelines, follow the rules, and things will get done.
Yes, because we covered this off last week, didn't we? There are a significant number of people who are in danger of missing the stamp duty deadline on 31st of March because they're not realising that it can take up to 4 months to complete a transaction. What's your view on that, Nadeem, at the moment? Is it likely to be 4 months typically, or are you managing to get them done sooner than that?
It's a mixture really. It depends on the property and the location and the council that you're dealing with. I've had some that we've done it within 6 weeks, and some which are taking a lot longer. But yeah, so it just depends on which area you're buying in and what sort of which council you're dealing with, really.
Yes, I mean, I've got some figures here. 10% of councils taking more than 6 weeks to do searches. And before the pandemic, 90% of councils took 10 days or fewer.
Well, I'm finding the ones that I'm doing in and around my area, etc., High Wycombe, the sort of Thames Valley, they're coming back quite quick, 10 to 15 working days. But it just depends on, sometimes it's potluck. You might get the council on a good day and they've got enough staff working. Sometimes they've just got one person in.
So I guess it can be regional, is what you're saying.
Correct.
Good. Okay, let's move on to another story, and this is probably more based around personal financial situations, Joe. Mortgage payment holidays have been extended. Obviously, we're in another lockdown at the moment. And it says that there are 1.6 million households, according to the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, or a fifth of British mortgage payers, that are concerned about how they're going to meet their payments over the next 3 months. And some 2.5 million people have taken a payment break on their mortgage. I mean, clearly, if you are in difficulty, they're a good idea. But is it your belief, or would it be your advice that if you want to take an opportunity of a mortgage holiday, that it would be good to do so? What's your thoughts, Joe?
Well, I think these mortgage holidays are important for families that obviously would normally struggle in a situation like this pandemic that has not only had furlough, perhaps job losses, and people that are generally at a loss as to what to do next. So I think the mortgage holidays that have been given by the lenders are good and supported by the government. My suggestion and recommendation will always be that where possible, do try and make some of those payments or make some off the payment. It really more for your own benefit, because time is one of those things that you have no control on, and before you know it, that 6 months is up. And yes, people probably have used some of that money that they would normally pay their mortgage with to do things that they otherwise couldn't. And before you know it, the next role is going to be, the lender is going to be chasing you. Ultimately, repossessions could be on the height. And whilst at the moment all of those things are protected, it's only a matter of time. So I always would say that, keep in touch, keep communications with your lender, and continue to make some sort of payment in order to build that relationship. If you have to, of course, you must do, and that's why they've made that creation. But if you don't have to, then try not to, because it's only going to come and bite you on the bottom of it later on.
Yes, because it doesn't actually go onto your credit history, does it? If you take a holiday at the moment, they're not allowed to put that on your credit record.
No, that's right. And so that's all very well for now. But of course, that then turns into a credit problem, month 12 and month 18 down the road, when they've turned around and said, okay, you've had your 6 months mortgage holiday. Yes, we didn't do that. Now we want you to make a program as to how you're going to make it up. And if you can't, then they're not protected anymore. So it is important that some sort of communication and some sort of payment structure is still created. I mean, for example, if someone has a £500 a month mortgage, and they can only maybe make a couple of £100 for the time being, then do the couple of £100, just to show that you're making an effort. At the end of the day, what I have to say is that this matter will end up in front of the man with the wig on his head, in front of a judge somewhere, and he's going to then look at it and say, what did you do? How did you make this effort? And I always try and suggest to all clients that if you make some sort of effort, some sort of gesture towards protecting yourself, then there's a chance that you will actually come out of it in the right way. I'm sure Nadeem may have a different view on that in terms of from a legal point of view, but from a general point of view, my general guidance is always to keep communications open with your lender.
And Nadeem,
I agree.
what's your view?
I think we've got to remember it's only a payment holiday. They've not written it off or anything. So in essence, you're just, if you need to, yes, delay it, but you've got to have some sort of contingency plan when that 6 months is up as to how you're going to pay it back, whether it's a top up on the existing monthly payment again. I think sometimes people are thinking, well, it's a holiday, I don't need to do nothing. And like Joe has said, may end up spending the money on something else. And then in 6 months' time, when the lender said, now I need that reimbursed, that's where problems occur.
I mean, we're in the 8th month now of the pandemic, so it's likely that people have already used up their 6 months, surely.
Yes, they have.
Well,
in some of them, in some cases, Paul, they have. In some cases, they hadn't. And also, it's also been a case of understanding. I think a lot of people didn't quite understand what this mortgage holiday was. And I think now, with the time of the year and the uncertainty and potentially people thinking that this may not be a month, it may be a bit longer over Christmas, when expenses are much, much higher because, Christmas itself tends to cost quite a lot of money for people. They might feel that this is the right time to have now taken. So I don't say to anybody, don't do what you're not going to do. My suggestion is quite simple, and that is that try and keep a dialogue and try and keep it maintained, even if it's a token gesture, so that it makes life easier for you later, because trust me, it will get difficult.
Okay, thank you very much. Question, or rather story number 3 this week, kind of goes back to what we were talking about last week, which was those that were getting close to the potential of missing the stamp duty holiday 31st of March. We already touched on it with Nadeem a moment ago. But what's interesting is that the Conveyancing Association are saying that it's 77 days currently from listing to a viable offer, and 123 days from offer to exchange. So this is why people are getting worried now. It's interesting, Nadeem, that 123 days is going to take us from sort of 1st of December, and some solicitors are not even taking on properties as of the 15th of December. Some of them saying January the 1st. So there is a real danger that people could miss this window if they don't act fast.
True, there is a danger, I agree, but equally from the solicitor's point of view, I understand why they're having a cut-off time, because we don't want to rush the work. We want to make sure we do a thorough job to save any issue later on down the line. So I think, yes, you've got this timescale. I think it's a case of clients being a bit more proactive, working with their conveyancer, providing the information to the solicitor in a timely fashion, so they can act upon it and forward it onto the other party. I think it's a teamwork between both solicitors and the both sets of clients, and the quality of information given.
Do you think the danger areas are going to be things like the searches, or will it be difficulty booking valuations, or is it holdouts with mortgages? Is it even the solicitors having difficulties with getting things turned around in time? Where do you think the dangers lie?
I think all the things that you mentioned, they're all problematic. It could be possibly the lender taking their time in getting the offer out. You've got valuers may take their time in terms, obviously they want to make sure they get the proper valuation to the lender. You've got obviously the councils who are taking a bit of time on the searches. You've got solicitors on the other side who may be snowed under, so they're not being as responsive to your queries. So I think it's a mixed bag of all of the things that you said put together, really.
Is there any wisdom in getting some of these bits of work done the moment that you list the property? Obviously, people tend to wait until they've got a buyer in place before they then instruct a solicitor. Is it worth getting on with some of these searches and things and getting that started from the moment you list the property?
Well, depending on who you act for, if acting for the seller, I would strongly recommend the estate agents to work with the potential conveyancers and get the property information form and the fixture and fitting form all ready. So when the offer comes in and we get instructed, then all I need to do is put the contract together. I've got all the forms completed, and then I can send them out potentially the same day. In terms of the buyer, yes, you can work together with the other side solicitor, but a lot of buyers say, well, we don't want to put our searches and incur the expense on the search until we get a mortgage offer, which then puts us in a quandary because we can't do the searches until the client gives us the monies on account.
And if I'm looking to instruct a solicitor for conveyancing, Nadeem, what are the key questions that you, as someone looking to purchase a property and do the conveyancing, or even sell a property, what are the questions that you need to ask a solicitor, would you say?
Well, the main thing is what their timescale is, what their expectations are. If they're working to the stamp duty holiday timescale, then we need to be honest and inform the client as to whether we can meet that deadline. That's what the main thing that we would want to know. And in terms of whether there's a chain in there, or are they first-time buyers? Is it just a simple transaction? I think them two are the main considerations.
And what about who's going to be handling the case? Because it's important that you know who is going to be the solicitor who's dealing with your case.
Yeah, well, I can't talk for other law firms. Everyone works different. Some people have teams, but it's important to let the client know who their point of contact is going to be, and that person needs to be available, whether it's by email or on the phone, because the whole of this process ultimately is communication. Whether it's with the client, the estate agent, the other side solicitors, communication is key.
And what professional bodies should a solicitor belong to? So I'm looking to instruct. What accreditation should I be looking for?
Well, the law firm has to be SRA regulated. That's the Solicitors Regulation Authority, or a licensed conveyancer, or a legal executive. They're the three main bodies. And most firms, in order to act for lenders as well, have to be what's called CQS accredited, which is Conveyancing Quality Scheme. So they're the main two things that the firm has to, the firm has to be, and then the solicitor or the conveyancer has to be individually licensed by that regulatory authority as well.
And when would you be expected to pay your conveyancing fees? I mean, are they taken out as part of the transaction at the end, or is there advance payment required? How does that work?
If it's majority of the time is at the end of the transaction, or just about whether we complete the sale or whether we complete the purchase, obviously that's when we get paid. But initially, a lot of solicitors do ask for money on account in case the matter does get abortive, and then there's the disbursement to pay out.
And if there's a dispute at any time or any kind of misunderstanding, what's the procedure generally for disputes?
Well, in terms of disputes or complaints, then obviously the client engagement letter has set out the procedure for complaints. Majority of the time, you contact the fee earner that's dealing with your matter. If you're then not happy with the response you received, then you can speak to their team leader or one of the senior partners. Ultimately, if you're still not happy at the end of it, then you have the right to go to the legal ombudsman.
So if I'm renting a property and I'm looking to buy, taking advantage of the scheme, many of the people that are taking part of this, taking advantage of this stamp duty holiday will be in rented accommodation. When should they hand in their notice?
Well, that's a difficult question because ideally you don't want to be handing in a notice until you've exchanged contracts, because if you don't exchange contracts, you haven't got a binding contract. So if you've given your notice and the deal falls through, then you potentially have the risk of becoming homeless. So ideally it should be done when you exchange contracts, but the difficulty with that is a lot of the sellers may want quick completion, but the notice period that you have to give under your rental agreement may be more than 2 months. So it's a tricky one. But ultimately, you shouldn't do it before exchange of contracts.
No, sure. And is it possible for you as a solicitor to act for both buyer and seller?
It's not advisable because of potential conflict of interest. So our regulatory authorities do not advise to act for the buyer and the seller. They should be separately represented.
Okay, so I know that you've been a solicitor for over 20 years. You've been acting for clients for a long time. But Blackstone Legal is a new, relatively new company, a practice, 3 years old. So tell us a little bit about Blackstone.
I formed Blackstone Legal back in 2017. I was initially working in London previously to that, but I've lived in High Wycombe and grew up in High Wycombe. I decided to come home, as they say, and I set this firm up in 2017, doing mainly property work. That's buying and selling of properties, and we do company commercial work, employment work, and dispute resolution.
Okay, so it's mainly focused around property as opposed to a sort of general solicitor's practice.
Correct.
Great stuff. So, Joe, you were going to talk around wills and things like that with Nadeem, weren't you?
Yes, Paul. So it's great to have Nadeem on board today, and thank you, Nadeem, for joining us. And this program is designed to be Property Matters. Property Matters, in my mind and heart, is a hub of life. It generates all connections to pretty much every industry that I can think of and I've been related to, and the legal profession is very much at the core of Property Matters. There isn't a situation or a transaction that happens without some input from the legal profession and the lawyers, and it's always a breath of fresh air to find that lawyers can work with agents and also clients and be more proactive, and that's part of the reason why we want to make sure that these things happen. Now, in our journey, Paul, what happens is that there's lots of areas that come to our attention, and one of the areas that's come to my attention time and time again is what I call succession planning, and planning in the sense that people with the best will in the world have some idea of what they will do, what will happen after the expiry of their life, or any circumstance, any accident, any injury, anything that happens in their life. And I guess we all feel we're immortal and nothing's ever going to happen to us. But 2019, I didn't expect 2020 to be the year it has. And so the reason I want to bring this particular point is that, sometimes these things that come closer to your home, and when you hear of and you discuss people that have expired in your own lives, in your own sort of circle, then you start asking and say, well, what should I do here? And I think one of the things that all people are very, very poor at doing is having a plan if and when that happens, and that's called succession planning. And part of that is about creating a will, and that's where I think Nadeem might be able to sort of put some light on the matter. I think sometimes what happens is people feel that doing all of those things is almost like a psychological final decision, and I will continue to say that it's not. It's just setting a platform and an understanding of your thoughts and beliefs in the event. I can share some stories, some horrific stories of those things, and I will do that because I think they are poignant under the current circumstances, and that is that with the best will in the world, someone does this, and then an accident happens. They've actually ended up having all the assets in that particular person's name, and no planning was done. And then before you know it, we spend our entire life, avoiding the tax man to pay the taxes and say that, I want to save this for our children, for our rainy day. And now that that accident has happened, that person has expired, the first person that will be at your doorstep is the tax man for all the things that you never paid for. So you spend your life avoiding him, but he is one person that will collect no matter what. It's a very patient man, the tax man. He will come and get it. And the other person is the bank manager, and of course he's normally got all the loans out on you, and so he's the other person that's going to come. Both of those will collect before. It's a bit like Monopoly. You go past this point and you collect this. They will collect their dues come what may, and so therefore it is very important to think about having a succession planning, a will in place, a plan to understand how that would be. And we'll probably have a separate program on that, but I just wanted to plant that in people's minds that, it's just poignant under the current circumstances in a day like today, when you can actually stop and think about what you do for the loved ones that you leave behind.
Yeah, Nadeem, that's a good point. What would be your advice on succession planning as a lawyer?
I think it's an extremely important document to have, because I'm sure a lot of us got certain wishes that we want certain items to go to certain people, and if we don't have a will, then it's a possibility that those items may never end up in where you want it to end up. So I think it's quite an important document, and like Joe did point out, we think, well, we're going to live forever, so or it's meant for people over the age of 60 or 70. It's not gonna, I don't need it at this stage. But actually, in today's market and today's climate we're in, it's more important because of the rising property prices, the number of properties we have. So as Joe pointed out, it's very likely that Mr. HMRC will turn up on our doorstep more quicker than we expected. So I think it's, especially when you're buying houses, I think it's a crucial document to put in place straight away. You can always change it as you're going along, so it's not set in stone forever. But it's an important. It's like an insurance document. We insure ourselves against the mortgage. Just look at it as an insurance document. At least you know that your loved one will get what you want them to get.
So is that something that Blackstone Legal can help with, for example, or do I have to go to a specialist solicitor?
No, I mean, we do have an in-house will writer. So if anyone needed advice on how to tax planning and in terms of succession planning, then we can certainly help them.
Okay, that's good news. Okay, and I suppose we're living in extraordinary times. As Joe said earlier on, who'd have predicted how 2020 would have turned out? But of course, the advice you're giving really is to sort it now and not leave it till it's too late.
Correct.
I think that it's a good point that Nadeem has just made, and I just want to pick up on that point, and that is that when a transaction completes, the problem in the current world is that everything has become remote. It's been, we do everything away from going back 40 years of my time in the business. The completion was done directly in front of the lawyer on the day, that go in and sign the papers. They're actually going and sign the papers on exchange of contracts, and it was almost a ceremony, if you want to call it that. That it took place because it was an exciting time. You just leave the house and you decide that, wow, I need to go and do that, and it was a role that happened. But unfortunately, with modern technology and emails and so forth, all of that has gone away, and therefore you don't actually get a chance to meet someone directly, and especially your lawyer. And sometimes law firms that are used in transactions are probably hundreds of miles away. But I think one of the things that is quite important to take on board here, and something that Nadeem just said, is that as the matter completes, I think as a package of that completion, there should be a standard thing that perhaps some legal people can use, where they actually say to the guy, look, today you've completed, congratulations, and well done on your completion. But by the way, here is a document that sets out a little bit of a guideline as to what you could or will do if anything happens to you here on forward. This is one of the most important assets that you will ever buy. It's your home or your investment, and you need to protect it. And I'm going to set out a standard will document which you can tell me to alter, but here it is as a gift, if you like, a gesture of goodwill, good relationships from your law firm, and I'm going to include it as part of the package for completion. Please sign it, send it back, and I'll be happy to administer it for you. I think that if some lawyers would actually take something like that in action and then put that in front of them, Nadeem, I think you'll find that there's probably more people that might actually think, well, actually, you know what, he makes sense, and he's a good guy, and he's helping me along, and I'll do it. I think when you leave it, past that point, they just never come back. They just think to themselves, I'll do it tomorrow, and tomorrow just never comes.
But yeah, I mean, I think when Paul asked previously what sort of questions should the client ask the solicitor, I think vice versa. When we're taking on clients, I think one of our questions, especially when they're buying property, should be, do you have a will? Because then that will alert you yes or no, and then during the transaction you can start to talk to them about possibly having a will. So when you come to the end of it, as you said, you can have here's a simple will prepared. If it meets some requirements, that's good. If not, please let us know and we'll amend it accordingly. But I think that would be a crucial question to ask from our point of view at the beginning of the transaction.
Let's move on to property in more general terms. The government have put another 150 billion in quantitative easing. We've got record low interest rates, which means, of course, for savers, that means there's very little return, if anything, for them now. So people are increasingly turning to property to make their money work for them. And Joe, you had some thoughts on that this week.
Yeah, Paul, again, I looked at the quantitative easing, the 150 billion pounds that the government wants to put into it. I also looked at the fact that there is circa 6 billion pounds of equity in property throughout the United Kingdom. Now, actually, that made me stop and think a little bit and think to myself, well, where else is there going to be that much equity, and where else within your own circle would you have such money available to yourself? And the reason I say that is from an Asian point of view, traditionally, my mother perhaps would have invested in gold many, many years ago with the idea that one day she may need to pay for something, or her daughter would get married and it would be part of a dowry that she would have to go, and you could pawn that gold to a pawnbroker and borrow money against it and deal with the things that you needed to deal with and things of importance. Well, that has been replaced by property, though gold is still there, but property is the new gold in most people's lives. And if I look back over the times that I've actually been involved, most people have bought and invested in property more so than anything else, because they can touch it, feel it, and see it. Even if it was lying empty or derelict and doing nothing, the chances are that it was going to be something that was going to be able to be used as a security, or potentially you could borrow against it or go to the bank, and so therefore they had some value. That's also where Bank of Mum and Dad came into it, because there was equity in their properties that ultimately they will probably leave to their children. They may be able to refinance it, use it, and then give them a sort of a lift onto the first ladder of property. So quite interesting to see that how important actually property plays a role in our lives, in our world today. And with such amount of equity that is within the properties, such amount of investment, you can't go wrong. As they say, bricks and mortar, that's where the value is. Nothing is more stronger than having your own home. But I've known over the years when people have bought property, and sometimes you ask yourself, you know what, why is that still sitting there lying empty, or why are they doing such and such? But the fact is that they actually can feel it, touch it, and see it. So investment in property is actually more and more prolific today than it probably was ever before, because in uncertain times, it's something that you know that you can go and touch, see, feel. And if you need to, go to the bank and say, I want to borrow some money against this, the chances are they'll look at it as security. Nothing more is secure. Try stocks and shares. I mean, does that actually add any value? And we know historically things like endowments and people which invested in endowments thinking that was going to solve the problem. None of those have done the thing. So it's in my mind, it's one of the most important investments that you'll ever make.
And Nadeem, have you seen an increase in the number of people looking to take on additional investment properties? Has that risen in your experience in the last few years?
Yeah, well, last few years, yeah, there's a lot more what's called new property people in the market, who investors, shall we say, who are now looking at, and they're looking all over the country, so they're not looking in their own local area anymore. They are prepared to go a bit far, maybe Manchester, Newcastle, etc. So there's a lot more activity on from those sort of clients now.
And presumably they're getting wiser in what sort of properties to choose, where they're going to get a decent return.
Exactly, they are correct.
And Joe, I guess that if an Englishman's home is his castle, as they often say, then obviously looking after the castle and keeping that investment protected is really important right now.
Yes, another one of my mantras, as they say, Paul. I just think that when you're buying and selling, and certainly when you're selling something, and that's not just in property, I think that's pretty much anything. I have a belief that we buy with our eyes. That's one of my little catchphrases, if you want to call it that. And the reason we say we buy with our eyes, that within about 10 seconds of appearing somewhere, and it could be anything. You imagine the amount of women's clothes that there are in a store, and yet amazingly enough, their eye goes to something in particular that they like, and they will go and try that on and think that that's what's right for them. And my view on that is that no matter how many thousands and millions of things that are lying around, they will actually turn around and say that, you know what, I'm going to buy that particular item. And that same subject relates to property as far as I'm concerned. Curb appeal is always been the key as far as property is concerned. And that means that you must maintain. Now, I know that people spend a lot of time and money and investment on the inside of their properties because they live inside it, and therefore it doesn't matter what the outside is. But let me reassure you, it's actually probably the other way around. And often when I look back in history, the gardens were always maintained well on the front. The front was looked after, cleaned, and so forth. And when somebody pulls up to buy that particular property, they kind of already bought it before they step inside. So it doesn't matter what inside was going to be. It's about, do you get them over the threshold? So the curb appeal was very important. So I will always say to people, no matter where you are, what you are doing, outside of your property is as important, perhaps if not more important, than the inside, to make sure that your windows are clean, your doors are washed down, and your garden looks great. And if you're doing that good, hopefully it will encourage your neighbors, because it's your neighborhood that also deters the value. Now, it determines the value. That you must understand that someone will pay for your home based not just on the outside, but also your neighborhood. If your neighborhood is such that you got cars on stilts and bricks and no wheels and whatever that circumstances are, the chances are, would you want to live there? Would you want to buy that? So the value, which is where I come to, the value of your home, your investment, be it your own house or your investment where you bought to rent, really is reflected in how it looks. Because if it doesn't look right, someone isn't going to want to buy it. And if they don't want to buy it, then the chances are you're not going to get the best value for it. So protect your investments in the best way. Make sure that you look at it. I find daily when I go out and look at properties that landlords have not taken care of their properties because they think, oh, well, it's okay, it's bringing me an income, I don't care. But let me tell you, it is important to make sure that the front part of it and the garden and the outside, the gutters, the leaves, growing in the gutters, and all that sort of stuff is dealt with. Is actually less if you deal with it regularly than it is if you leave it until the tenant leaves, and then you're throwing a lot of money into it for the next one. So a little and often is better than nothing at all, as most things in life are. But I think curb appeal is very, very important. And I will always say to everybody, make sure that when somebody pulls up outside, at least it's attractive for them to get inside. And once you're inside, then of course, yes, people will put their own stamp on it. They'll say, okay, I want to, paint this wall white, or I want to, this color carpet or whatever. That's the dream. That's the home they're creating. But the house they're buying before the home they create has to be attractive.
Sound advice as always, Joe. Thank you. Nadeem, we're almost out of time, in fact. So let's just wrap up today and say, if I'm looking to sell a property or purchase a property and I'm looking to talk to Blackstone Legal, how can we get in touch and what should people do?
Right, basically, you can ring me on my number, which is 01494 443 204, or you can email me or go to our website. All our details are on our website. We're more than happy to help you.
Fantastic. And what we'll do after this in the information section underneath the video, we'll put your details in there so people can click through from there. Gentlemen, we're out of time. Our 40 minutes is up as always. It always seems to go so fast. Thank you for your time this morning. Hope that was of interest to everyone watching. Thank you to everyone watching. And of course, we'll be back with another live Property Matters next Sunday morning at 10 o'clock.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Paul.